My name is Alara Vance. I'm 32 years old, and as of 3 hours ago, I became the owner of my family's century-old textile empire. The irony is that I am currently sitting at the very same mahogany dining table where my ambition was so casually dismissed for most of my life. My father, Arthur, is at the head of the table, holding court over Thanksgiving dinner. He just made a toast to the salvation of the company, and now he's turned his gaze to me. "And how is your venture, Alara?" he asks, a familiar, patronizing warmth in his voice. "Still working from that little office in Raleigh?" He glances at my simple wool dress, a stark contrast to the severe business suits he and my brother Liam prefer. I just nod, a quiet smile playing on my lips. My phone, resting on my lap, had buzzed just before we sat down. The message was brief, a simple, elegant conclusion to a long and complicated chapter: acquisition of Evergreen Textiles finalized. Summit Creek Holdings, a wholly owned subsidiary of Acacia Innovations, now holds 100% of all company assets. I look at my father's face, relieved and self-satisfied, and the smile I give him is genuine. He has no idea that the future he was just toasting belongs to me. He has no idea that the daughter he saw as a dreamer, a disappointment, has just saved his legacy from his own stubborn pride. This isn't a story about revenge, not really. It's a story about how I learned that my path, the one they never understood, was the only one that could lead us all home. Growing up a Vance of Asheville, North Carolina, meant living within the warp and weft of a story woven long before I was born. Our family home, a sprawling white manor with deep verandas, was shaded by ancient oaks, a monument to Southern tradition and the fortune built by Evergreen Textiles. From the outside, we were the picture of established grace. But inside, the air was often thin, the emotional currents as carefully managed and colorless as the undyed cotton in our mills. Evergreen Textiles wasn't just a business, it was the Vance identity. My great-grandfather, William Vance, had founded it in 1923, transforming a small weaving operation into a cornerstone of the regional economy. His portrait, severe and unsmiling, hung in the grand foyer, its painted eyes a constant, silent judgment of our adherence to the Vance standard. My father, Arthur, inherited the company and the mindset. He ran both Evergreen and our family with an unyielding belief in tradition and authority. His word was law, his methods unquestionable. "Business is about strength, Alara," he would lecture over dinner, the polished mahogany reflecting the stern set of his jaw. "The Vances don't follow trends, we endure." My mother, Eleanor, was the perfect partner to his rule. She was a master of the soft power that propped up his hard authority, hosting flawless dinners for buyers and local dignitaries, her life a meticulously curated performance. Her advice to me was always aesthetic. "A Vance woman is a reflection of the family's quality," she'd murmur, adjusting the collar of my dress. "Your appearance is our finest thread." My brother, Liam, was the heir apparent, woven from the same sturdy cloth as our father. He graduated from Duke's Business School and slid effortlessly into a vice president role at Evergreen, a corner office waiting for him. The succession was never in doubt. "Liam understands the fabric of this business," my father would boom to his golf partners, while I, sitting at the same table, felt as substantial as a shadow. My sister, Sophie, chose a different, but equally acceptable, pattern. She married the son of one of Dad's oldest suppliers, her life dedicated to charity boards and social events that burnished the family name. "Why do you have to make everything so complicated, Alara?" she'd ask, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion during some family function. "It's so much easier to just fit in." And then there was me. The loose thread, the snag in the otherwise perfect tapestry. From a young age, my mind worked differently. I didn't see tradition. I saw inefficiency. Why were our dye vats still using a process that wasted thousands of gallons of water a day? Why weren't we exploring digital looms when our European competitors were? Why did we refer to the people in our mills as labor costs instead of skilled artisans? Each question was met with a sigh or a condescending chuckle. "That's not how the real world works, sweetheart," my father would say, the endearment a dismissal. I tried to prove my worth on their terms. At 14, I started a small business selling hand-dyed silk scarves using natural pigments I'd learned to make from plants on our property. It was a modest success at local craft fairs. When I proudly showed my father the $100 I'd made, he patted my head. A charming little hobby. But real business is about volume, not one-off novelties. He then turned to Liam to discuss a new contract for industrial-grade polyester. The deepest cut came when I was 16. I spent a month obsessively researching and developing a water recycling system for the dyeing process. I created a detailed proposal, complete with projected cost savings and a phased implementation plan. I calculated it could reduce water consumption by 30% and save nearly $200,000 a year at just one of our smaller mills. My father, to my surprise, agreed to let me present it at a family dinner. My heart hammered against my ribs as I laid out the diagrams and charts on the dining table. It's based on a closed-loop system, I explained, my voice trembling with earnest excitement. He glanced at the first page, his expression unreadable. He then pushed the folder aside. Theories from a high school science project. It's admirable, Alara, but we'll trust the systems designed by our engineers. 2 years later, I learned that Liam had presented a new efficiency initiative based on a consultant's report. It was a watered-down, less ambitious version of my proposal, but my father heralded it as a sign of Liam's forward-thinking leadership. By the time I was a senior in high school, I understood. In the Vance family, your value was measured by your contribution to evergreen textiles. And in their eyes, I was a liability, a dreamer whose ideas were not just impractical, but a subtle critique of their entire world. I was the black sheep, and I knew my only chance at a life of my own was to escape the fold. The first stitch in the fabric of my own life was my college application. The Vance path was preordained, a business degree from a respectable Southern university, followed by an MBA, and then a place at Evergreen. My father had already spoken to the dean of admissions at his alma mater. It's in your blood, Alara, he'd insisted. Even if you only manage a small department, you need to understand the business. I applied to UNC Chapel Hill's environmental science program instead. The evening I told them is seared into my memory. My father's face, usually a mask of calm authority, flushed a deep, alarming red. Environmental science, he sputtered, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. What in God's name do you plan to do with that? Protest your own family's company. Technology and sustainability are the future of manufacturing, I tried to explain, my voice steadier than I felt. We could be a leader in. A leader in what? He cut in. Wasting money on frivolous green nonsense? We are in the business of making textiles, not saving the planet. Liam smirked from across the table. Let her go, Dad. She can go hug some trees. It's not like she was ever going to be a serious part of the company anyway. My mother, ever the gentle buffer, placed a cool hand on my father's arm. Arthur, perhaps Alara could bring a new perspective to our compliance department one day. It was the closest I'd ever get to support, a suggestion that even my rebellion could eventually be hemmed and stitched back into the family pattern. My father's parting words as I left for Chapel Hill were a prophecy I was determined to defy. When you're finished with this little phase, there will be a place for you at Evergreen. Something suitable. College was like the first deep breath after being underwater for 18 years. I was suddenly surrounded by people who saw my questions not as an annoyance, but as the beginning of a solution. I met my best friend, Maya, in a geochemistry lab. She was brilliant, funny, and saw me for who I was, not who my family wanted me to be. Alara, the way your brain connects environmental impact to business logistics is incredible, she told me once. You're not a tree hugger, you're a systems builder. During my sophomore year, I interned at a small Raleigh-based startup that developed sustainable manufacturing solutions. My boss, Dr. Eris Thorne, became the mentor my father could never be. He was a quiet, intense man who saw the beauty in efficiency. Never accept that's just how it's done as an answer, Alara, he advised. That phrase is the epitaph of innovation. I spent my summers there, absorbing everything, watching them help struggling companies become not just greener, but more profitable. It was tangible proof of everything I'd tried to tell my family. Holidays at home became exercises in quiet endurance. The conversations were a constant loop of Evergreen's market share and Liam's latest triumphs. I was a ghost at the table, my own achievements, graduating with honors, winning a university innovation prize, going unmentioned and unasked about. After graduation, I received a formal job offer from Evergreen Textiles. It was for a junior role in the compliance department, at a salary that was a fraction of what Liam had started with. "It's a chance to learn the business from the ground up," my father said, as if bestowing a great favor. I politely declined and accepted a position with a forward-thinking firm in the Research Triangle Park called Syntex Solutions, a company revolutionizing industrial processes with AI and sustainable chemistry. My first apartment was a tiny one-bedroom in Raleigh that could have fit inside our sunroom back home. My mother visited once, her expression a mixture of pity and horror. "Darling, you don't have to live like this," she'd pleaded. "Just come home. Your father will find you a nice condo downtown." "I need to do this my way, Mom," I told her. "I just hope you know what you're giving up," she said, her voice soft with sadness. "Your birthright." She couldn't understand that I was finally claiming my true birthright, the discovery of my own capabilities, untethered from the weight of my last name. At Syntex, I thrived. Within 2 years, I was leading a team developing software that helped chemical plants reduce toxic runoff by 60%. My reputation grew, and I built a network of colleagues who valued my mind, not my lineage. The emotional gulf between my family and me widened with every success. At a tense Easter dinner, my father spent 20 minutes lamenting the decline of real American manufacturing at the hands of tech bubbles and government overreach. When I tried to offer a counter-perspective from my work in the field, he patted my hand. "That's all well and good for your little software companies, Alara. Evergreen operates in the real world." That night, lying awake in my small apartment, the idea for Acacia Innovations began to take root. I wasn't just a loose thread anymore. I was going to weave something entirely new. To start Acacia Innovations, I needed capital. My savings were substantial, but not enough. The seed money came from a place of quiet rebellion. My great-aunt Isolde, my grandfather's sister, had been the family's original eccentric. She had traveled the world, never married, and left me a surprising inheritance of $200,000 with a simple note, "For a life of your own making." She was the one who had secretly given me books on botany and engineering, whispering, "Don't let them trim your branches to fit their garden." I used her gift to rent a small office space in a nondescript building in Raleigh and hired my first 2 employees. My life became a blur of 18-hour days fueled by coffee and conviction. My dining table was a mess of circuit boards and business plans. When my family found out, the gentle condescension morphed into open mockery. "Alara's playing entrepreneur," Liam announced at the next family Thanksgiving, a smirk on his face. "How's that going, sis? Sold any apps?" "What is it your company does, exactly?" my father asked, the tone implying it wasn't a real company at all. I took a deep breath. "We create integrated hardware and software solutions that help traditional manufacturers transition to sustainable and more efficient practices. We reduce waste, cut energy costs, and increase output." "So you sell fancy widgets to factories," Liam summarized, laughing. "Actually," I countered, my voice level. "Our first pilot project with a small furniture maker in High Point increased their production efficiency by 22% while cutting their finishing waste in half." My father waved a dismissive hand. "A small furniture maker. Call us when you can do that at the scale of Evergreen." "It's a fantasy." Those early years were a crucible. For every win, there were 10 rejections from executives who saw me as a young woman with a glorified PowerPoint presentation. I pushed my credit cards to their limits. One month, I had to choose between paying my own rent and making payroll. I chose payroll and slept on the office couch for 2 weeks, a fact I never shared with anyone. 6 months in, Ben Carter joined me. We'd worked together at Syntex, and he was a genius of operations. He took a massive pay cut to become my partner, believing in the vision when it was little more than a blueprint and a prayer. "The manufacturing world is like an old, magnificent ship," he said one late night, looking over our projections. "It's powerful, but it's leaking, and the crew is too busy bailing water to see the storm on the horizon. You're not just offering them better buckets, Alara. You're offering them a new engine. Slowly, we built our team of believers. We found a brilliant coder who could turn the complexities of a factory floor into elegant algorithms, and a chemical engineer who could rethink decades-old processes. Our first major breakthrough came when we helped a mid-sized paper mill on the verge of bankruptcy. Our system overhauled their water and pulp usage, saving them from closure and making them profitable for the first time in a decade. Their CEO became our greatest champion. Yet at every family gathering, my success was a footnote. When Acacia was featured in a regional business journal, my father glanced at the article and said, "Nice press. Let's see if you're still around in 5 years." When I mentioned we'd secured our first multi-million-dollar contract, Liam countered with a story about a minor deal Evergreen had closed. When I talked about our environmental impact, my mother would steer the conversation to Sophie's latest charity auction. The most painful dismissal came when we won a contract with a textile company that was a direct competitor to Evergreen. My family saw it not as a validation of my work, but as an act of war. "Working with the enemy now, are we?" my father said, his voice cold as ice over the phone. "Is this your way of getting back at me for not giving you a corner office?" "This has nothing to do with you or Evergreen," I said, my voice tight with frustration. They were willing to innovate. "While I do what?" he challenged. "While I continue to run a company that has supported this family for 4 generations, your little science experiment is helping our rivals. Think about how that looks." I hung up, the injustice of it a physical ache in my chest. I returned to my office that night and worked until dawn, fueled by a new, sharper determination. If they couldn't see my worth, I would build something so undeniable they would have no choice but to see. "You know what the real problem is?" Ben said to me one night as we sketched out expansion plans on a whiteboard. "Your family is trapped inside the frame of their own painting. They can't see the gallery it's hanging in. To really change an industry, you have to come from the outside. That's your superpower, Alara. You've been an outsider your whole life." He was right. The very thing that had made me a disappointment in my family was my greatest asset. I understood their world, but I wasn't bound by it. Over the next 2 years, Acacia Innovations grew beyond my wildest dreams. We expanded into hardware, creating custom sensors and processors that could be retrofitted onto old machinery. Our client list grew to include some of the most respected names in manufacturing. We secured a major funding round from a venture capital firm that specialized in sustainable tech. Our valuation soared. Through it all, my family's perception of me remained frozen in time. They saw the girl with the charming hobby, the dreamer with a little project. They couldn't, or wouldn't, see the woman who was quietly reshaping the industry they believed they still dominated. What they didn't know was that their world was beginning to fray at the edges, and the loose thread they had cast out was about to become their only lifeline. The first whispers of trouble at Evergreen Textiles reached me not through family, but through industry channels. A supplier mentioned they were slow to pay. A former Syntex colleague told me Evergreen had lost a major contract to a more nimble, modern competitor. Then came the public signs. Their quarterly earnings report showed a significant decline, the first in over a decade. At the next family dinner, my father dismissed it as a market correction. But I saw the tension in the set of his shoulders, the way he refilled his bourbon glass a little too quickly. Liam was defensive, his usual bravado replaced with a brittle anger directed at unfair foreign competition and suffocating regulations. The industry reports told a different story. They highlighted Evergreen's aging infrastructure, its high overhead, and its failure to adapt to a market that increasingly valued sustainable and transparent supply chains. They were a heavyweight boxer fighting with yesterday's tactics, slow and predictable, while swifter opponents danced around them. I decided to try, one more time, to breach the fortress of my father's pride. I found him alone in his study after dinner, the scent of leather and old paper filling the air. "Dad," I began, "I've been following the market, and I think Acacia could genuinely help. We've developed systems specifically for older textile mills like..." He held up a hand, cutting me off. "Alara, I'm glad your company is doing well. But Evergreen is not one of your little startup clients. We have a century of experience. We don't need saving." This isn't just a slump, I pressed, my voice gentle but firm. The entire industry is changing. Sustainability isn't a buzzword anymore. It's a core business principle. Our systems could cut your production costs by 20% and bring you into compliance with the new environmental standards before they even become mandatory. His expression hardened. So now you're the expert on my business? The business you couldn't wait to run away from? When you've run a company for more than a few years, maybe then you can offer me advice. Until then, tend to your own garden. I left his study that night with a heavy heart. I had offered a bridge and he had set it on fire. Meanwhile, Acacia's ascent continued. We landed a partnership with a major German manufacturing conglomerate, and our valuation crossed the $500 million mark. We were no longer a startup, we were an industry force. One afternoon, I received a call from a Mr. Harrison, a long-serving member of Evergreen's board. He was a kind, old-school gentleman who had always sent me a polite Christmas card, even after I'd left the family fold. He asked to meet for coffee. Arthur would never admit this, Alara, he said, his voice low and grave, but the company is in serious trouble. We're leveraged to the hilt. Liam's cost-cutting measures are alienating our most skilled workers, and we're losing clients we've had for 50 years. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though a cold premonition was already taking shape in my mind. He looked at me over the rim of his coffee cup. Because you might be the only one who can fix it. You understand the future, but you also have the Vance name. You care about the legacy. I've offered to help, I said quietly. He refused. He might not have a choice for much longer, Mr. Harrison replied grimly. There's quiet talk on the board. We may have to seek a buyer if we can't turn things around in the next 6 months. The thought of Evergreen being sold to a private equity firm, stripped for its assets, its loyal employees discarded, was unexpectedly painful. For all my history, it was still my great-grandfather's company. It was part of me. At my mother's birthday dinner a few weeks later, the strain was palpable. My father looked tired. Liam drank too much. I made one last, desperate attempt. I was reading about some new dye-fixing technologies. I began cautiously. Oh, here we go, Liam muttered into his wine glass. I ignored him. They can reduce chemical usage and improve color fastness. It's the kind of innovation that could really... Is this another sales pitch, Alara? My father asked, his voice sharp. Are you using your mother's birthday to prospect for business? The accusation stung, sharp and unfair. I'm trying to help, I said, my voice barely a whisper. This is our family. We'll be sure to call you if we ever need a lecture on how to run the business that put clothes on your back and sent you to that fancy college, he said, his words a final, slamming door. 2 weeks later, Mr. Harrison called again. They're looking for a buyer, Alara. Quietly. Arthur would rather sell the company to a stranger than admit to you that he needs help. That night, I sat in my apartment, the city lights of Raleigh glittering below. I pulled up Acacia's financials next to the market analysis I'd compiled on Evergreen. The company was wounded, but its bones were good. Its brand, its history, its physical assets, they were still immensely valuable. An idea began to form, audacious and terrifying. What if Acacia didn't just help Evergreen? What if Acacia bought Evergreen? It would have to be done in secret. If they knew I was the buyer, their pride would never allow it. I would have to create a holding company, work through intermediaries, and stay in the shadows until the ink was dry. It was a staggering risk, both financially and emotionally. Was this about saving the family legacy, or was it about finally, definitively, proving them wrong? After a week of sleepless nights and intense discussions with Ben and my leadership team, I realized the answer was both. And that was okay. The business logic was sound. My personal history didn't invalidate the strategic sense of the acquisition, it gave it purpose. I would save my family's company, not by conforming to their world, but by bringing their world into mine. The decision was made. The plan was in motion. By its 5th year, Acacia Innovations was everything my family had said a business like mine could never be: stable, profitable, and influential. We had offices in Raleigh, Boston, and a small research outpost in Germany. Our technology was setting new industry standards for efficiency and sustainability. I had gone from sleeping on an office couch to being a keynote speaker at international tech conferences. But the core mission, born from my great-aunt Isolde's inheritance and my own stubborn conviction, remained the same. We were a company with a conscience. We turned down lucrative contracts with businesses that were only interested in greenwashing their public image. Anthony Blake, the CEO of a major competitor, once said of me at a panel discussion, "The thing that makes Alara Vance so formidable is that she actually believes all this stuff. She's not just chasing a market, she's creating one from pure principle." I considered it the highest compliment. All the while, the news about Evergreen grew more dire. They had closed a mill in South Carolina, laying off over 200 people, many of whom had worked there their entire lives. Mr. Harrison kept me discreetly informed of the board's growing desperation. They had entertained offers, but they were from vulture-like private equity firms who planned to dismantle the company and sell it for parts. Then came the call I had been preparing for. Evergreen Textiles was officially, though secretly, for sale. An investment bank had been retained to find a suitable buyer. It was time. Acacia had just completed a new round of funding, giving us a significant war chest for strategic acquisitions. Acquiring Evergreen wasn't just an emotional move, it was a perfect strategic fit. Their manufacturing infrastructure, even outdated, would accelerate our hardware division by 5 years, Ben said, his eyes alight as he studied the due diligence reports we'd secretly commissioned. Their facilities plus our tech, we would be untouchable. The rest of my executive team agreed. The brand still had cachet. The physical assets were solid. The only thing failing was the leadership's vision. "But this is your family," Alara, my head of engineering, a brilliant woman named Sophia, said gently. "Can you be objective enough to see this through?" It was the question I had been asking myself for months. "I believe I can," I answered. "But we have to do this carefully. My name cannot appear anywhere until the deal is done." We created a holding company, Summit Creek Holdings, a name that evoked the North Carolina mountains of my childhood. We staffed it with trusted lawyers and bankers who understood the extreme sensitivity of the transaction. We crafted an offer that was not just financially compelling, but also included firm commitments to retain employees and invest in modernizing the facilities. It was an offer designed to appeal to board members like Mr. Harrison, who cared about the company's soul, not just its stock price. The negotiations stretched on for 3 agonizing months. It was a high-wire act of financial maneuvering and emotional suppression. I had to sit through a family brunch where Liam boasted about a major investor who was about to save the day, all the while knowing that the investor was, in fact, me. As autumn settled over the Blue Ridge Mountains, the deal neared its conclusion. The timing was so poetic it felt scripted. The final signing was scheduled for the morning of Thanksgiving Day. The day before Thanksgiving, my lead lawyer called. "The board has voted. They've accepted the offer from Summit Creek. The papers will be executed at 10 a.m. tomorrow." That night, sleep was impossible. The ghosts of every condescending remark, every dismissive pat on the head, every accusation of betrayal, swirled in my mind. But beneath the turmoil was a deep, quiet certainty. I wasn't destroying my family's legacy. I was reimagining it. Thanksgiving morning, as the sun cast long shadows through the pines, my phone lit up with a string of messages. The final documents were signed. The funds were transferred. At 11:47 a.m., I received the final confirmation. The textile empire built by the Vances now belonged to me. I took a deep breath, dressed in a simple navy dress, and drove the familiar road to my parents' house, a strange sense of peace settling over me. The past was a closed book. The future was waiting at the dinner table. I arrived at the manor at precisely 2 o'clock. The house smelled of roasted turkey and my mother's jasmine perfume, a scent of carefully constructed domestic peace. She greeted me at the door with a kiss on the cheek, her eyes doing a quick, critical scan of my attire. "Alara, darling, you made it," she said. "Everyone's in the living room. Your father is in a wonderful mood." I walked into the familiar room and understood why. My father stood by the grand fireplace, a glass of fine bourbon in his hand, a look of profound relief on his face. Liam stood beside him, preening like a prince who had just won a great victory. "There she is," my father announced, raising his glass. "Our little innovator graces us with her presence." Happy Thanksgiving, I said, accepting a glass of wine from Sophie. You all seem to be celebrating. We've had some very good news, Liam interjected, unable to contain himself. We've secured Evergreen's future. A private acquisition. New capital, but Dad and I remain in charge of operations. A perfect outcome. I felt a quiet smile touch my lips. They had no idea. The investment bank had honored our request for anonymity until the last possible moment. That's wonderful news, I said, my voice perfectly neutral. What's the name of the acquiring company? Some holding company out of Charlotte, my father said dismissively. Summit Creek Holdings. The important thing is, they understand the value of stable leadership. I caught Mr. Harrison's eye from across the room. He was the only other person there who knew the truth. He gave me the barest, most subtle of nods. Dinner was served at the long mahogany table, the same table where my childhood proposal had been brushed aside. For a while, the conversation was light. Then, as the main course was served, my father raised his glass for a toast. To Evergreen Textiles, he declared. To a new chapter of prosperity, guided by the same Vance leadership that has made it great for a century. As glasses clinked, he turned to me. And how is your venture, Alara? He asked, his tone magnanimous in his moment of triumph. Still working from that little office in Raleigh? This was the moment. The air seemed to crackle with unspoken history. Sometimes, I answered, setting down my wine glass. I reached for my phone, which I'd placed on my lap. Actually, I received a rather important confirmation just before I arrived. I feigned reading a message, then looked up, my gaze meeting my father's directly. It says here the acquisition of Evergreen Textiles by Summit Creek Holdings is complete. They now own 100% of the company. Yes, we know that, Liam said impatiently. We just told you. What you don't know, I continued, my voice calm and clear in the suddenly silent room, is that Summit Creek Holdings is a company I created for the sole purpose of this acquisition. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of Acacia Innovations. The silence that followed was absolute, heavier, and more profound than any sound. My father's fork clattered onto his plate. Liam's face went from smug to confused to a pale mask of disbelief. My mother's hand flew to the pearl necklace at her throat. What did you say? My father finally stammered. I said that as of 11:47 this morning, I repeated, my voice unwavering, my company owns Evergreen Textiles. Which means I own it. That's a lie. Liam exploded. A sick, twisted joke. It was Mr. Harrison who spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. It's no joke, Liam. I've seen the paperwork. The board approved the sale unanimously. Summit Creek, and by extension Acacia, made the best offer. The only offer that guaranteed the company's survival and the employees' jobs. My father turned his stunned, furious gaze on him. You knew? You knew my own daughter was behind this. I knew the buyer was the best hope for Evergreen's future, Mr. Harrison corrected him gently. The company needs what Alara and Acacia can provide. My father's control finally snapped. He slammed his hand on the table. This is a hostile takeover. By my own child. I will not stand for it. It wasn't hostile, Dad, I said softly. You signed the papers yourself this morning. It was a business transaction, approved by your board to save the company from bankruptcy. We'll sue. Liam hissed, his face blotchy with rage. This is fraud. There is no fraud, Mr. Harrison stated. You had every opportunity to perform due diligence on the buyer. You chose not to. My mother finally found her voice, her words a wounded plea. Alara, why? Why would you do this to us? Why the deception? It was the one question that mattered. Because you would have never listened otherwise, I said, looking from my mother to my father. Would you have even taken my meeting? Would you have considered an offer from me on its merits? Or would your pride have gotten in the way? His silence was my answer. I did this because Evergreen is failing, I continued, the truth now laid bare on the table between us. Not because you're a bad businessman, Dad, but because you refuse to see that the world had changed. I watched you mortgage the company's future to protect its past. I watched you risk everything my great-grandfather built rather than admit you might be wrong. And you think you can do better? He challenged, his voice thick with scorn. Yes, I said, simply and without arrogance. I do. Because I'm not trapped by the way things have always been done. My entire career has been about building the bridge between tradition and innovation. I can save this company. I am the only one who can. So this is your revenge, Liam spat. For all those years we didn't fall at your feet and worship your brilliant ideas. This isn't about revenge, Liam, I said, though I knew a small part of me savored the vindication. This is about survival. Your survival. In 6 months, Evergreen would have been sold for scrap. I am giving it a future. Sophie, who had been silent, finally spoke, her voice small. What happens now? It was a practical question, and I was grateful for it. Now we get to work, I said, turning my focus to the future. We integrate Acacia's technology. We modernize the mills. We make Evergreen profitable, sustainable, and strong again. As for your roles, I said, looking at my father and brother, that's up to you. I'm not here to fire my own family. I am offering you a place in this new future. A real partnership. But it will be a partnership of equals. My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. He stared at me, a decade of conflict and misunderstanding in his eyes. I will not work for you. Not for me, I corrected gently. With me. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the dining room. Liam shot me a look of pure hatred and followed him. My mother hesitated, torn, then hurried after her husband. Only Sophie, her husband, and Mr. Harrison remained. The magnificent Thanksgiving feast sat cold and forgotten. After a long moment, Sophie looked at me, a flicker of something new in her eyes, not admiration, but a dawning understanding. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I think you were right. Things were much worse than they let on. I nodded, a wave of exhaustion and relief washing over me. I know. Mr. Harrison raised his glass. To the future, he said, his voice warm. I raised mine to meet his. To the future. The road ahead would be difficult. Wounds needed to heal, trust needed to be built from the ground up. But as I sat there at the head of my family's table, I felt not like a conqueror, but like a weaver who had finally been given the chance to repair a precious, unraveling tapestry, one strong, new thread at a time.